Everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. If you guys have followed along the podcast for the past few episodes, what we've been doing is really having an exit planning or value acceleration podcast, but not necessarily from the professional advisor standpoint, which is where we operate really the most, but really from an owner's perspective, me as a kind of a lifelong entrepreneur, if you will, and with my guest today, the topic is family business. So for those of you that perhaps don't know the Exit Planning Institute and our story, Chris Snider, our CEO and the creator of the Value Acceleration methodology, the author of our book, Walking to Destiny, is my father. If he's listening, not my brother. He does look young and handsome, but nonetheless, my father nonetheless. So family business has always been near and dear to our heart. We were talking about this a little bit kind of pre-show. This year, I've been working with my dad here at EPI for 11 years, and I have been indirectly working with Dad throughout my career for the past 21 years. So in business with Dad, near and dear to my heart. Today, my guests are Tom Deans and Amy Wirtz. To give them a kind of a brief introduction, you'll certainly get to know them over the next 40 or 50 minutes of our show, but Amy is a certified exit planning advisor, a family business consultant with the Family Business Consulting Group, and is a SEPA faculty member, so certainly a practitioner. Interesting backstory for Amy, honestly, and both of these folks are impactful people to me. So I met Amy because 11 years ago, she helped me through my divorce. So she was and is one of the best collaborators I know, and I think we should probably tell her own story throughout the show, but nonetheless has taken those skills and put them into helping family businesses achieve their goals, helping owners really of all kinds of different businesses achieve their goals as a certified exit planning advisor. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
And Tom Deans is author of a book that I think many family business owners have read, certainly very prominent in the exit planning community, certainly something near and dear to our heart, something that Dad and I actually use every year. In December, we sit down at the kitchen table, or really, I think it starts right at the kitchen table and then moves to the kitchen island. But we go through the family blueprint, which we'll kind of talk about as we go through the show. But author of Every Family's Business and Willing Wisdom, certainly a family business and intergenerational expert, came all the way from Canada to hang out with us today. So thank you, Tom. So welcome.
Great to be here.
So I guess I want to frame, and we kind of talked about this pre-show, and I thought it would be a really interesting way to start the conversation around family business, and to just say, well, what is a family business? From what I've learned, literally just within the last few minutes, that, and you probably already kind of knew this, right? But hearing you two experts talk about it is that it's not what you might think it is, or maybe it should be changing in your mind as a family business owner. But I want to talk to Amy first, because as a faculty member, as a longtime SEPA, you've been a SEPA since 2014. Yeah. She disagrees with one of the kind of major stats that, in fact, our company, Exit Planning Institute, talks about quite often. We always say, looking at these family business statistics, that as you get through the generations, family business gets less and less successful. So only about 30% successful from first generation to second, and only about 12% successvel into the third generation. But I don't know if you agree with that. Can you talk about that?
I totally disagree with those stats. So this is why. Actually, I've met the people that did that study. And at the time they did the study, you were not a successful business in that criteria if you sold your company. So we at the Family Business Consulting Group say, look, we are in existence. Our consulting group is in existence to support the legacy creation that family businesses start. In order to define legacy, that legacy doesn't have to be the same entity through generations.
Sure.
So it is a success if at generation 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, the shareholder group says, you know what, this entity that we're building, I'm going to use the classic example in family business, we're building wagon wheels, and wagon wheels don't sell that well anymore, right? So we need to liquidate this business, harvest the value, and then the next generation will give loans to or a leg up on for starting their own businesses, which might be a soccer league, it might be a farm, it might be creating an educational institute, right?
Sure.
But the definitions in that study are very constraining. And I think if you really study longevity of family businesses, it's rare to think that if what you did was have a hardware store, that same hardware store is going to last 7 generations. Typically, it's not going to make it because of external factors as well as internal factors. Sure. So quite honestly, I hate those statistics.
Yeah. Well, I just don't think that, they are representative of the actual success. So like Tom, we were talking too, that I guess technically you would have been inside of those unsuccessful business owners simply because you didn't carry on the legacy of your dad's plastic manufacturing. You talked about being a 4th generation business owner, but your business is publishing, where dad's might have been plastics, grandpa's was chemicals.
Yep.
So you're kind of
we're complete.
Totally disagree too.
We're a complete failed family business by that definition. We're complete losers.
Yeah.
But my son, who is an entrepreneur,
sure,
is 5th generation. But what we do is what we're doing is we're starting businesses, we're involving family, we're scaling them, and then we harvest the value and transition the wealth to the next generation of entrepreneurs who starts a business that they're passionate about, that's early on in its life cycle, and that one will be sold over and over and over and over, 5 times.
Right.
But there we are. We're a loser. We're a loser family because we never take that building, that family business, the bricks and mortar, and transition it to the next generation. And it really was the genesis for writing the book. It's like we were the largest employer in our town. We sell our business. We make the front page of our local newspaper. I'm coming out of our local bank branch, and I asked a question by someone I knew. You know what the question was? Are you going to be okay?
Right. Yeah.
There's that assumption that if you've sold a family business, that building, that bricks and mortar, something was wrong, something was broken, you've lost something. I thought, I have to write this book. We got to shift this narrative and give business owners this idea that it's not a kind of like the buyer is the victor and the seller is the vanquished, right? How about selling a business, selling it inside the family to the next generation or to a competitor outside the family? That's the high water mark of success. That's exit planning.
It is.
How about shifting that narrative? And I think, quite frankly, that's why the book did well and continues to do well, because it offers a lifeline to business owners to take care of themselves. No one comes through the door and says to a 70-year-old business owner, it's high time you take care of yourself. You've been taking care of your family, your employees, your customers. You've been taking care of your lenders. Mm-hmm. These guys are freaking exhausted. And no one is saying you got to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I think that, and even looking at some of the family business owners I know personally throughout my life and currently in my life, I always wonder if there's almost like a forced intergenerational transition where you just as second generation, I guess, right? Do I feel like I'm obligated to take on dad's business? Like even though I might not really want to, like I might like working there, I don't know if I want to be an owner of that company. I might be passionate about publishing and maybe, or like your son, like advertising and harvest that wealth and turn it into something different. But you have to see this kind of forced intergenerational transition.
I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in that scenario.
Yeah.
And the first is that we know that business owners store their wealth in their operating business.
Well, surely.
Because they don't want to take it out and pay tax. So they make a profit, keep pumping their profits and earnings back into the business over and over and over. And then they go to the oldest page in the playbook, which is when it comes to exit planning. I'm going to retire, draw a salary while my next generation son and daughter run my business.
Right.
It ain't going to work. It is destroying families from the inside out. Because what are you left with? You're left that succeeding generation, the rising generation, is left with one conclusion. The only way that they can get definitive operating and ownership control is for someone to die. How great is that?
Well, it's got to just be like a real bummer, right? Like you're sitting around and your dad's like, or mom is 85 years old and you're like, maybe I do really want the business, but I'm never actually going to have any control of where this goes until they actually step out. You have to see it in practice all the time.
Yeah, I have stories coming out the yin yang.
We can dive down a rabbit hole.
So what I would say to you is, we talk, and I know you do too, Tom, because I've read your books, but there's 3 levels of succession in family businesses, right? So there's the ownership succession, there's leadership succession, and there's family succession. So in the story that you told, that you set up, is, they feel like they have to continue the business. So in my families, what I often hear, especially from second generation owners, is, I've worked here since I was 20 years old. I'm now 57 years old. Mom and dad are in their 70s, maybe 80s. I don't own anything. I have a great lifestyle business. I make decent money, or I don't, depending on the family.
Yeah, depending, right?
Depending on the family. And I work for my parents, which allows me to go to my son's baseball games or to be able to take care of my mother who's sick, right?
Yeah.
Without any flack, right? But I'm 57 years old and they're never going to die and I'm never going to own this thing, so I'm done, right? I have actually seen those people leave and say, I'm done. So, however, as you know, I work immensely in farming,
Sure.
in RV and campgrounds, and they're land-based companies, right? Most of their assets is in ground. And in the United States tax system, it's very expensive for multiple reasons to sell your company to your children. And so most of it is passed inside of trusts or inside of death processes in order to avoid immense embedded capital gain taxes, because it's multi-generational, kick the can down the road tax planning by your accountants and your lawyers, right? So even if there is an idea that this should pass prior to death, what I typically talk about more is, how do we have the leading owning generation maybe not step out of complete ownership, but there be a marriage of ideas, some transfer of ownership so that they see the value increase during their time and they get dividend income as well as, or partnership distributions as well as their salary. But more importantly, they're allowed to stamp their identity into the company before they want to retire. I have one family farm that I work with that have done that immensely well, and they're going to their 5th to 6th generation. The culture of transition is the leading generation steps way back in their early mid-50s and lets the next generation come in and lead before the end of like 57.
Isn't
There's
that
a
wildly
transition.
unique, though? I think that would be unique. I mean, I guess it wasn't for you, though. I mean, you and your father had a similar relationship of what she's talking about, where when you were in the business with your dad, we were talking about this at dinner, where I was kind of shocked. Like,
Yeah.
Dad let you kind of take the reins, have control,
Yeah.
and take the company to the next level. But I
Yeah, it was
actually
weird.
think that
It was really weird.
Really? It's
but
kinda
but I think he laid the
reluctant.
groundwork in a very different way, and it kind of speaks
Okay.
to how different our family culture is. I was buying shares in my father's company 7 years before I joined as an employee,
really.
based on a third-party valuation. No discounts for kids. Not in our family. Like it's
Not in the
business.
Deans family.
But why did I do that? Why did I borrow money? Why did I take savings? Why did I invest in that company? Because I was inside a deal. I could see the return on invested capital was around 18%. It was a phenomenal deal. I couldn't get that in the public markets.
Sure.
So I did my first round of investment.
You had skin in the game before you worked there.
Before I worked there. So I bought shares.
unique.
5 years after buying shares, he put me on the board of directors. 2 years later, he hired me as CEO. So think about it. In our family, we do it all backwards. Shareholder first, director second, employee third.
That's very different.
But I can tell you, when I'm walking in as an employee, I know this is not the Tom Dean's legacy project. All I got to do is kind of mail it in for 15, 20 years till my kids are old enough and I can transition the ownership and the old family business plan. Like, not in our family. That's my job as CEO, to continue to risk capital to work towards 51% definitive control. Or that's my job to find a buyer for that business. But we don't get all weepy about our businesses. They're not our pets. They're not our friend. They're not this kind of project that we and we don't get emotionally connected to these assets. It's an instrument of wealth creation. It goes up in value or it goes down in value. And our job is to exit, find a buyer.
So easier said than done, though.
No,
So
it's
like
just
in your
brutal. No, it's
teachings,
hard.
right? In your teachings, if you're speaking to a group of owners, right? So probably folks like me and Amy, from an advisory perspective, you're like, this is exactly what we want owners to know, that your business is just another asset inside of your entire financial portfolio. Now, likely your most valuable asset, but nevertheless, it goes up and down, and it's just another asset, another vehicle of wealth creation. But if you're sitting and speaking in front of a bunch of owners, you have to be blowing their minds, or they have to be sometimes sitting there saying, like, I don't know, like, this guy seems kind of like BS, right? Because I am very emotionally tied to my business, and my son will take this over.
Yeah, they look so sad. My audience looks so sad. They're so disappointed. There's the other one that's angry, and actually, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I mean, what I'm sharing is a deeply contrarian perspective.
It is.
But it's also from a place of experience. And I don't know. I'm just sharing what's worked well for our family. I don't have a lock hold on the truth. It's worked well for us. And it's a very different perspective. This idea is instead of pursuing the longevity of our businesses, we're actually trying to find the end. And here's the paradox. The harder we try to build businesses that have value, that are sellable, the longer they last.
That is true.
It's
the whole point.
It's really odd. It's like nothing is what it appears to be when it comes to exit planning. And so, yeah, the book, the public lectures, everything I've been doing for 15 years continue. I'm spitting into the wind. It is an uphill battle facing this cultural, norm that it is the job of a founder to continue the business in family hands. And if they don't, somehow they've failed.
Well, don't you think the whole conversation of family enterprises is changing that cultural spit in your face? Because in our industry, in the family business advising industry, we have heard a lot about and are dealing with the concept of social shifting from being family business advisors to being family enterprise advisors, which is a totally different language and theory. So our faculty in EPI that teaches this section is, he really spends a lot of time, Mike spends a lot of time talking about, a family business is a family that owns a hardware store, right? A family enterprise is a family that says, okay, we own 3 hardware stores and we own real estate that's worth 5 times more than our hardware stores. And we're going to harvest this and continue the legacy of wealth in our family by saying we can make more money as a family enterprise. And that, it's 3 nucleus families that are looking at entrepreneurship as a characteristic of their family legacy versus, and instilling that education and passion in the next generation for continual evolution of investigating what they can do on their own or with others to make money as a family, right? So instead of looking at it from just the hardware standpoint, it's what can we do with each generation to instill the values that we believe in as a family, whether that's entrepreneurial, philanthropic, where are they at, right? And taking that from an educational standpoint and value standpoint and combining that wealth together to create more wealth for future generations. And I think that might help you stop being spit at in the face as you're going out there.
Yeah, no, it's a great evolution in the consulting world, because I can tell you when I started out, it really was a tough sell to try to shift that narrative that you should be a founder. Listen, if you're in business and you've lasted more than 5 years, you've already beaten the odds. Like you've done what so many people fail to do. So. But then don't get so emotionally connected to this thing, right? So what happens is business owners feel like this obligation to offer their children the same experience, which is an incredible feeling of satisfaction. You've beaten the odds, you've built something of value. Yeah. You invite your kids into the business, and then they find themselves painted into a corner. They don't know how to get out. They know how to get in. They know how to grow. They know how to make money really good. Like we know family businesses they're machines. But how do you get out? How do you sell a business where your children are driving a lifestyle? You can see why business owners dither and why they need the help of CPAs, why they need the help of exit planning specialists, because there is no playbook other than do this. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint what this is.
Yeah, I think
nothing, right? Nothing. Like just wait.
It's just, I think change is hard, right? And I was talking about this a few weeks ago in our like EPI State of the Institute address, where I think the work that we're doing right now with the baby boomers is probably first off the most immediate marketplace for advisors, right? At least here in the States, right? 51% of the lower middle market and small companies are owned by the baby boomer business owner. But that next biggest chunk now is 43% owned by basically the upper end of the millennials and then into the Gen Xers.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the challenge that we always think the challenge is trying to get these boomers out of their business. I think the challenge that maybe you're alluding to a little bit is that if we could do our jobs right as advisors, start to change that mentality, these 35-year-olds, 45-year-olds will actually start to think a way that we're all talking about right now, right? It's not just about the operating entity that is my business. It's about the wealth that I'm creating so that, and I want to talk about this next after the break, that, how do we actually now harvest that value and then go do something else? Like my legacy isn't necessarily my business so that my son or daughter can come into this business and run it one day. It's the wealth that we generated by doing this activity, then actually selling it to go do something else that the next generation is passionate about. So, folks, stay with us. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. I want to dive deeper into these family business topics.
Walking to Destiny was written to arm business owners and their advisors with the knowledge and understanding needed to recognize their potential, execute growth tactics, and harvest the wealth locked inside a business. Originally written in 2016 by the creator of the Value Acceleration Methodology, Chris Snider, Walking to Destiny 2.0 features a fresh and evolved look into the proven system to maximize value, grow income, and build a business that can be run without you, even if you never plan to leave. Discover how to align your business, personal, and financial goals. Distinguish between your business's attractiveness and readiness to transition. Measure the value of your intangible assets that likely contribute 80% of your company's value. Adopt a process to measure your results every 90 days. Walking to Destiny is the foundation for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor Credentialing Program. More than 5,000 advisors hold the CEPA designation, the world's leading exit planning credential. Grab your copy of Walking to Destiny 2.0 by visiting www.wtddownloads.com.
All right, welcome back to the Exit is Now podcast. So I want to get into this gifting shares or buying shares. I think that it just makes a difference. And people always compliment, actually, me and my dad. They say, wow, it seems like you guys get along well. It seems like you have a nice relationship. And you know us personally, right?
Yeah,
it's hard,
yeah.
right?
It's
not
hard.
always as glamorous as it might seem from the outside.
Right.
It takes a lot of practice. But before that, I think, and I challenge, right? Like my dad, I don't know if my dad would agree with this or not, right? He's a pretty passionate family business guy. But I think I look at my dad as my father, but I look at him as my business partner because I have skin in the game, right?
Yeah,
So it's just like
sure.
a different,
Yeah.
it's different for me because I'm like, well, that is my dad, but that's also my business partner. So I have like almost like a double obligation, right? Like that's
Yep.
dad and business partner. I just think that having skin in the game is a little bit different than gifting a business. So talk to me about that. I mean, that's like the kind of the basis of the book, if you will.
Well, I think, the gifting of voting shares is at the core of most family wealth destruction. Who's going to say no to a free business? We got people, next gens, hanging around family businesses. A, that's where the money is.
Sure.
That's where the wealth is stored. B, there's this sense if I don't join the family business, I'm going to be a little bit removed from the family wealth. So, because we know that half of all business owners don't even have a will. So there's this sense so we have unintended economic incentives being offered to the next gens. They're not even often aware of this bias, but people are attracted. And then, of course, there's the CEO, right? The chief emotional officer, mom, who wants all the kids in the business getting paid all exactly the same amount of money.
equal.
Doesn't matter if one's coming in at 8 and another one's coming in at 11, right? Everyone should have the same lifestyle. It becomes this kind of weird kind of family bank thing. And there's a lot of that going on. And it becomes so confusing. People don't know how to make sense of it, right? The family operates on democracy, right? Everyone getting the same thing, right? Then you got this business over here that has a completely different operating system called a different value system called it's a meritocracy. Not everyone has the same vote. Business is about control. You either have it or you don't, right? You either have it or you don't. And so, You know, as Amy described, you got that 57-year-old who's been working in the family business for 20 years. He's 57, has no voting shares, and it's just like they're done. Like they're walking. They're just, all they actually want from their parents is permission to retire. Like they've given up on the dream of actually having definitive voting control. They just leave out of complete frustration. Exactly at the moment in time when parents really need that next generation to step up and take over control. So gifting, I think, is a major, major problem. I don't know if you've ever received anything as a gift.
Sure.
Did you take that last birthday gift and take it to a pawn shop and sell it? What do we do with gifts?
We keep them.
We keep them.
If they're really good, we cherish them. We put them up in our room so people can see it.
Absolutely. But we don't change them.
No.
It is that gifting of shares that is causing a lack of innovation in the next generation. The next generation doesn't feel like they have the authentic permission to change a business, change its product mix, change its business platform, whatever. So they keep it and they become stewards. And they run businesses the way they were gifted them. And it is a big, big problem. The facilitating the sale of shares at full market value to the next generation really requires a third party, a SEPA, right? To help navigate and manage those conversations. They're tricky conversations. What we often find is that the next generation, when they find out that they actually have to pay market price for the shares, they may like their job, but they really don't want the business. They don't want to become an owner. Family businesses conflate ownership with employment all the time. Kids think, I'm working hard, I'm doing way more than I'm being paid for. There's a lot of exploitation going on in family businesses. But they always do this, and maybe when they gather enough confidence to challenge their parents about what their compensation is, they hear something. And you know what that something is? Oh, relax. Don't worry. One day, all this will be yours. And do you see what just happened there? They conflate employment, salaries, with ownership. And then they never untangle it until death. And that's when the shares transition. Transition to who? Usually to all the kids in an equal amount, thrusting brothers and sisters into business together as equal business partners. And it is destroying families from the inside out. And it is all preventable. It is the gifting of shares that has always been the problem for the survival of family businesses.
Amy, you got to see it in practice all the time, right? Like, how are we navigating
Wow, I have so much to say.
We're going to unpack here.
All right. So this is why I have a job.
Well, sure.
Right? So what we do as family enterprise advisors is we say, okay, yes, if you do no education, no governance, no foundational support for your leading generations and next generations, you're going to have the horror story that Tom just set out. And I have been pulled in when that happens, and it is hard. It's super hard. But we have some very intelligent family business owners that work with the Family Business Consulting Group that say, hey, we don't want that. We want to create success for our companies, for our management, and for our family. How do we do this? So what I spend a lot of time with families talking about is, what is it we're really wanting to pass on, right? How do we separate? I do a Venn diagram, which you're familiar with. How do we keep those systems healthy? And what support can we put in those systems so they can thrive, right? And transitions in the systems can happen well. So I currently am working with 3 family businesses where they're examining how to do that well. And the issue is we're moving from sibling ownership to cousin ownership. And the biggest issue they have is, you know, should this generation, this cousin generation, have a choice or a chance ownership? Chance ownership is inheritance. It's by chance. You get it because you inherit it. You may want it, you may not. A choice is a real strong conversation about what the business is, what ownership is, what does ownership look like if you're not working there? What kind of benefits do you even get out of it if you're not working there? How complicated is it? And what does saying no look like, right? For all 3 entities, right? And what's a liquidation clause look like? Should liquidation happen at the ownership level now or at cousin level? What are the tax implications? How do we navigate this? How do we create the best management system for that business? Continuity? Is it selling it now, or is it really doing an appropriate leadership search where you have compensation set by the industry factors and market factors. You employ only qualified people in the company, if they're family or not family, right?
Sure.
And we lead it with purpose and strategic planning, not lead it with family first. And then, how do we create the best policies for there to be multiple shareholders in the family system? That's what we do. So we can be brought in proactively, or we can be brought in retroactively. Families survive proactive. Families implode on reactive.
Well, it's the whole thing about exit planning, right? That's why we always say exit planning is business strategy, certainly inside the family business. My question is, though, for really both of you, is, and maybe it's me being naive, right? But it's like, say that the next gen doesn't have any equity. They're like my age, right? They don't have any equity yet, say, and they know, but they do want to buy the business. They have ideas. They see how they can evolve the business, and they want to buy in. You would say that they should, in fact, buy in, likely at a market kind of valuation. What does that look like, though? Because a 35-year-old guy, a 40-year-old gal, they don't have a lot of money. They got kids. They got all kinds of stuff. So do they get a loan? Do they take a loan from mom and dad? What's it look like?
I get this question all the time because it is the first question that I usually get from my audience is, great theory, Tom.
Well, sounds great.
You want my kids to buy my business? It's worth, $5 million. I think they'll buy it at market price, but they're 4.9 million short. Like, how does this work?
Yeah.
Well, I am a huge proponent of facilitated family meetings. A lot of the people who buy my book, wealth advisors, insurance professionals, lawyers, accountants, they are trusted advisors that are inserting themselves inside these families. You see, when family business transition goes poorly, everyone pays a price. The professional service providers, the lawyers, the accountants, wealth advisors, everyone loses. So there's a lot of people who want this to go down differently. They want to help. So the family meeting is turning out to be that thing where families can sit down and say, okay, we can. This business is going to transition. It's going to transition inside the family or outside the family. Here is how I recommend they do it. I encourage mom and dad, first of all, in their 70s or 80s, to get some of that wealth that they're hoarding inside that operating business, get it out. They're in first violation of the first principle of sound financial investing, which is asset allocation, particularly as you age, right? If that family business fails, that's going to wipe out not just that family, but generations to come. So get some of that wealth out of the business now. And in the concept of the family meeting, it's start making living gifts. And when you're transitioning, let's call it $10,000. It can be $1,000. It can be $1 million or $10 million. The amount is irrelevant. But let's just work with $10,000. Imagine in a family meeting, you sit down with your mother and your father, and they say, "Hey, kids, we've run the numbers. We know how much money we're going to need for retirement if we live to 100 years old. We have surplus wealth. And we want to start to transition some of that now because we want to coach that wealth, those gifts. We want to coach you in how you use it and give you access to our personal and professional networks. By the way, kids, our business is for sale. Would you like to buy $10,000 worth of shares? And don't tell me you don't have money because we just gave you $10,000. Follow the money. The money never lies. If the kids don't return the money and buy $10,000 worth of voting shares, newsflash, they don't want it.
They don't want the business.
They don't want it. Money never lies. It's such a great way to shine a light on the subject and find out, and that $10,000 may represent, 3% of the company, 1%, 0.5%. There's an old expression on the prairies. You can eat a cow one burger at a time. Do you know why so many family businesses never sell internally? It's because mom and dad finally in their 70s go, "Hey kids, do you want to buy the business? It's worth $10 million. Like, where are the kids going to come up with $10 million?
Where are you getting $10 million?
But when they started in their 30s or 40s and said, "Hey kids, do you want to buy one share and then use the dividend from that one share to buy 2 shares and 2 shares, now a bigger dividend, now 4 shares, 8 shares, 15, 30% of the business, that's a nice dividend stream." When they get to 51%, which was my goal when I was buying shares in my father's business, my father taught me that I would have definitive control. I could change the dividend policy, suck the retained earnings out of the business, and retire my personal debt. I didn't trip over that idea in the forest walking my dog one morning. He taught it to me.
Yeah.
And if I didn't want to get to 51%, then we would sell it to the highest bidder. And then we would harvest that wealth, and then we would start the next journey of our family journey, which is not chemicals, not plastics, not publishing, high tech. I don't know what's next for my kids. That's up to them to decide, with all sorts of advantages that comes with the transition of lots of communication and coaching and transparency around the transition of family wealth.
Amy, so outside of like equity, the other thing that always strikes me is so I've seen obviously family business as well, and I'm sitting there and I'm seeing father and son is clearly not the visionary, not the president of the company, not an operator. He might be a good salesperson or a good accounting representative, but he or she is not the next president or CEO of that company. How do you tell mom and dad that? Like, hey, we want our, even if they're gonna buy, right? So even son saying, I want to buy shares, I'm in. Sure. But you know that this business will fail because not everybody's a born entrepreneur, right?
Right. Yeah. And you know what we do is we do a whole series of what is it to be an owner? What kind of owner do you want to be? There's the owner operator, there's the owner leader, and there's the owner that isn't even in the business, right? So we have a lot of conversation about ownership. We actually have assessments for choosing the next family business leader in our company that was created by Doug Gray and Kent Rhodes. It's a fairly new product. It's an amazing product. It's a great tool to use to soften the blow.
Yes, yeah, right. Help the conversation.
Help the conversation. So is it yes, you can run this, no, you can't. The other thing we talk about and I spend a lot of time and have written articles about is, yes, maybe that person isn't the leader today, but they want to be the leader.
Yeah.
What are the skills that they would need to acquire, and what's the time frame to do that in? What's the gap, and who's going to fill the gap, right? So lots of times I currently have two right now, where we have a generation that's working in it, but they're 27 and 29, right? The current non-family CEO is looking at exiting in 3 years. That 27 and 29-year-old is not ready to lead that company when that CEO is going to exit. So we have to do a search for a CEO. And we are planning the CEO and executive leadership team transition, well thought out education plan. What is it to be the next leader of XYZ company for the next 15 years? What qualities do we need? What do we need to search? We actually use search teams. We interview internal and external. It is just like any other company. We are business minded in that. We're not saying to the rising generation, you can never do this, but right now you're not ready yet. They know that. They've got little kids, they don't want to be the CEO yet, but they may aspire or they may never be. And they're willing to say, it is the best interest of our family business to know that we may never be the CEO of this company, that the future of this company might be led by non-family members.
I mean, I think it's the whole concept of being proactive versus reactive, right? I mean,
yes.
In having proactive conversations or having appropriate exit planning within your business, I think some of the best life as an owner is being a totally decentralized owner, right? Where, look, I've surrounded myself, even if I'm literally just in the operational department, or in the shipping and receiving department. Like, I don't have a big wig kind of executive C-suite or director or president, vice president role, but I have a great team surrounding me and I do have equity. And to me, it's like some of the best businesses are these very decentralized owner type businesses. Although I do think it would be hard to have somebody running my dad's business that's not me.
It would be a challenge if you don't have the right foundation under that ownership. If what you have is the owner being the plant operations manager, right? And he's 75% owner, and your executive team has, the rest of out of 5 people divided those shares, and someone else is the CEO, and the whole family's looking at you like, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you here? I mean, that is if you don't have a board that's helping run that, it's going to be tough. That would be really, really challenging. Really,
really hard. And, we keep painting this picture that, life unfolds predictably, like, people die. People die at 90. Yep. They retire at 65. Well, the reality is there's going to be some business owners listening in today,
sure,
who are going to have a health event in their 50s. They will have entertain none of what we've talked about today. There is no planning, no will, no power of attorney. They're going to die, and their shares, the state's going to have the laws of intestacy are going to thrust those voting shares into the hands of a surviving spouse who is ill-prepared, doesn't know the lenders or the employees. The key employees are going to bolt for the door because they're
sure.
rightfully scared of what's going to unfold. You've got spouses who die shortly thereafter. Then the shares come down to the kids, triggering capital gains. Where do the kids go for cash to pay their personal tax bill? They reach into the operating business. It doesn't have the cash flow. The business fails in the next generation's hands. And then everyone goes, well, you see, there it is. Those lazy millennial spendthrift kids who have no respect for their parents' business. And it is wholly unfair.
Right.
It is wholly unfair. It was designed that way through incompetence, or even worse, negligence, or even worse, that 1%, and he's always a guy, and it's always an old guy, who is at the back of my room, and he is uncomfortable when I'm delivering my message. And you know what his plan is around succession?
What?
Nothing.
To die.
And they're not dumb. These are bright, accomplished, high-performing executives and founders. And their plan is no plan. The plan is that they're going to die, all hell will break loose. Tax liabilities, key employees leaving, sibling rivalry, and that's the plan. That the business will ultimately fail, and then everyone will gather around their coffin and say, my God, Larry was brilliant. He died, and so did the business. He was so good, he was the only guy on the planet that could run that business. That's how good Larry was.
So I'm going to give you the opposite. So what I see is the opposite. I see, and it's not just founders. It's my business must continue beyond my life so that I live from the grave. And it's my dream to have, my grandkids, my nieces and nephews, my children run this business all together. And that's how I'm going to leave it, even though all flags are raised that that's going to be a disaster. The lawyers are telling him it. The accountants are telling it. Their wives, husbands, wives. I don't want to be sexist here. I have executive females that are blind as much as executive males that are blind because their dream is to have this live beyond their lifetime so they live. It is very egotistical.
Kind of is.
It's incredibly egotistical. So I can tell a story of a family I've worked with for 5 years. Wonderful family. Just the salt of the earth. Nicest people you've never wanted to meet, right? Like you would want to meet, not never want to meet. You would really want to meet. Just like you want to sit and have a beer around a campfire, right? Great people. Dad's insisting that this company be left to his 3 children and then the grandchildren, right? Mom's insisting that that will be a train wreck. I have been helping them get ready for transition for many years. And at the end of the day, these siblings struggle to get along together. They just do. There's a prodigal son that came home from working in another business. That business went belly up that he worked for. He came home, he was going to be one of the owners. He was going to be part of this business because what Tom said is true. In that particular business, all the wealth is in the business. And if you don't own the business, where are you going to get a part of that pie? The oldest son's saying, why are you here? I've been here for 27 years. The middle daughter saying, I've been here for 18. What are you doing here? Right? And it was a disaster. And when I sat down with them for the last time, what I said to them is, you don't really have a choice because your parents won't change. And so if mom dies first, this business will go to the 3 of you. And there's nothing, you've had your choice, you've had your voice, we've talked this to death. This is dad's dream. If dad dies first, mom will sell it before you can say goodbye, and there will be wealth to distribute amongst you.
Right.
And mom died first.
The business is your legacy. It is the greatest work of art for any founder. And you're absolutely right. That is the majority of business owners who approach succession from that perspective. I want this thing to live on as the greatest example of my work. The reality is, and this is the contrarian part of my message,
right,
businesses don't last.
They don't. Yeah.
It's not a gut feel. It's the data. Of the 100 largest firms in America in the year 1900, only 16 were in business. Now, yes, lots were sold, right? It's not just failure, but they were sold. Yeah. Businesses we've spent a remarkably little time looking at failure, but that's where all the great lessons in business are. It's not how you scale and grow, and lots of books on that. Very few books on failure, business failure. The reality is, big businesses, this is part of the mythology of market capitalism. The bigger you are, the older you are, the harder you fall. The biggest bankruptcy in the history of the planet was Lehman Brothers. $691 billion failure. That's almost $1 trillion in an economy that was only $16 trillion in size, in GDP. Businesses fail. They collapse under their own weight. This idea that if we just add another product, get it into the hands of the next generation, just get a little bit longer, it'll be my greatest work of art, my legacy. Let me ask you a question, and I know you should know the answer to this.
Oh boy, put me on the spot.
Who was the founder of Coca-Cola?
Oh, I don't even know.
I don't either.
Oh, okay. So I should know.
I keep forgetting to Google it. Third most valuable consumer brand in the world. No one gives a damn. No one cares. Right. Businesses are not legacies. Businesses are things that go up in value or go down in value. They create opportunities for the next generation, wealth created. I can tell you the most successful family business in the history of the planet are the Rothschilds. They are in and out of the same businesses all the time. They have mastered an advanced concept in investing called buy low, sell high. And they don't get a weepy in the middle. They do it all the time. They teach their children to love business. Not love our business to death, but to love business, to love commerce, and they teach them the difference.
They heard this on the show. I talk about this is like my first exit planning lesson, right? It's like after I sold my landscaping company, I was low, right? Like we made the decision to sell, and then I kind of lost my identity, right? And what on the earliest lessons from Dad, SEPA, was, son, you let your business define who you were, right? Mm-hmm. And then once I realized, in fact, whether it was EPI, professional education, whether it was professional soccer, whether it was landscaping, horticulture, I was in love with building businesses, working with people, solving problems, bringing great products and services. So I want to take a quick break, come back from the break, and talk a little bit more about how to get this integrated and tell a little story. So give us a quick 2 minutes, and we'll be right back.
Get ready to uncover innovative solutions, build deeper relationships, and share transformational experiences at the Exit Planning Summit this May in Scottsdale, Arizona. The Summit is the world's largest exit planning-centric event, bringing together professional advisors and their teams from around the globe. It is the premier conference for people committed to working with business owners, accelerating business value, aligning personal and financial strategies for the business owners, and collaborating with the top professionals in the market today. The transformative experience does not stop when the sessions end. Immerse yourself in a distinctive lifestyle experience that transcends expectation. Join us at the magnificent Five Diamond Resort, the Phoenician, the premier luxury hotel in Scottsdale. Immerse yourself in breathtaking views, impeccable service, and unparalleled amenities. Curate a distinctive resort experience infused with a retreat-like ambiance that transforms your well-being. Learn more and reserve your spot now at www.exitplanningsummit.com.
Welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So during the break, we were talking about successful family companies, right? So I think the challenge, right, not that it's negative, it's just a big challenge in a shift of mindset of what a family business is. And I think it's really important that a lot of the listeners in this show really kind of take out of it, right? I truly love this concept, this mindset shift of, I'm not just a family business, but a family enterprise. It's another asset inside of our portfolio. But to Amy's point during the break too, the family business isn't the show Succession.
It is
for those
not.
of you that watch that, right? That's TV. Can you just talk to us about what it is like? And if my dad's listening to the show too, I think there's a lot of positivity that comes from family values. I think the culture that we built, the way we treat our employees. I mean, hell, to be totally honest with you guys, right? I probably spend more time with the 25 or 30 of our employees here at EPI than I do literally with my own family. And kind of like you, 130 speaking engagements a year traveling the country, I travel with our team almost more than I travel probably with my own family. So, but there's a lot of good. There's a lot of success, a lot of lessons.
Yeah, there are a ton of lessons. And, you know, one of the things I absolutely love about doing what I do is the beautiful families I meet. And, you know, the American economy is not supported by the top 500 publicly traded companies. It is supported, and it is really important that people understand this. The true value of the American economy sits in family businesses. We employ more people, and we support more programs that go out in charitable contributions in communities and tax dollars in this country than the top 500 corporate publicly traded companies. We don't talk about it, but we do. And the beautiful thing about family businesses is that it creates an opportunity when you are proactive to create great human capital to infuse inside your family and companies and your communities. I see families that are very intentional about wanting to prepare the upcoming generations to be good human beings through the legacy of the value they create through their family companies and family enterprises. They talk about how do we pass on our family values that make us unique? How do we teach them about what values can be created, not only for them, but inside our employees' families and inside our communities with the wealth that we generate, right? I hear this all the time. How do we raise good human beings that are not entitled brats? You do it with intention. You do it with teaching them about values. You do it with teaching them about the stories of your family, how you got from A to B. I mean, in my family alone, my mother's family migrated from Russia. They were Russian Jews. They landed in Ellis Island. They were put on trains to move to Iowa. Why the heck they sent Jews to the middle of Iowa blows my mind. They created a scrap business. They picked up junk and they created scrap yards. But they also employed people. They also did charitable acts. They also grew industry. They built temples. They gave. I mean, at my grandfather's funeral, a man came up to me and said, "You have no idea who I am, but when our Catholic church burnt down in our community from arson, your grandfather walked over and wrote the largest check we got to rebuild our Catholic church." And he's Jewish.
Right.
That was the man your grandpa was. I didn't know that story, but I would have believed it till the day was long because those were the values my grandpa taught me through the legacy of wealth. That's what I see in our businesses. That's the opportunity that we create when we're intentional about making sure we don't attach to just one business like Tom teaches about, but that we teach inside of our family the value of enterprise, the values our family cherish, and how to leverage the wealth that can be created in these entities. And have fun. I mean, when we do family meetings, what's 1/3 education, 1/3 application, and 1/3 fun. Go have fun. You have to create family memories. If all you do is talk about how you're going to make your next dollar in your family business, nobody's going to come.
I can tell you in our first family meeting, I was telling you the story yesterday. I might have told you this story. I commend my dad. Over the past couple of years, he's been more focused ever on wills and trusts, on estate planning and things of that nature. And so we had our first family meeting. And my mother, who enjoys being a part of a family business, but doesn't work in them, right? And is kind of a private lady, and it just doesn't like a lot of awkwardness, right? And you have me, my sister, my brother-in-law, kind of all sitting around the back at this family kitchen table at mom and dad's house. And my mom goes, she's kind of sitting there quietly. And so Ashley, my sister, goes, "Well, Ma, you haven't said much. Like, what's on your mind?" And she goes, "Oh, so glad somebody asked." She's like, I don't really care what's going on right now, but the only thing I want you guys all to know is that I want to be cremated. And that's that, right? Which, is, I'd like to think my family generally is a fairly traditional Catholic Midwestern family, right? So, like, when mom dies, the whole casket in the ground with a beautiful funeral is kind of mom's thing, but apparently it's not. She wants to, like, go to St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands, sprinkle some there, take some home, whatever it might be. But I think that the kind of wrapping up kind of our show and our thoughts is that one of the things that really sticks out to me in listening to both of you is that there's this huge sense or urgency of proactive communication and proactive planning.
Yeah, I absolutely 100%. And that's born out of conversation. And the answer that is right for your family and your business transition is completely different than my family. And the answer resides in that space between two people that we can close that gap through conversation if we just trust family to be the best that they can be. And that's a big leap. On the positive side, if a business is not a legacy, it does beg the question, what is? And I think it is our family. I think it's our relationships. And to hear Amy talk about family meetings and to watch families navigate these tricky conversations with the help of trusted advisors like SEBA's.
Yeah.
And to hear a founder say, okay, I've just learned today you don't want to continue my business, but that doesn't mean that I don't want you to succeed. To hear a business founder say, I want my son or daughter to be not as good as me, but better, and to create that space for them to navigate and become the people that is authentic to them, those are amazing moments.
Amazing moments.
That's a family business. Even though it could be in transition outside the family business, that is a family that is going to succeed.
Absolutely.
Those are beautiful moments.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for our show today. I want to thank Tom for coming all the way in. And I guess, Amy, you used to be a Clevelander. Now you're Hoosier, I guess.
I do both.
Yeah,
I live in
both.
Cleveland and Indiana.
Yeah. So, nonetheless, I appreciate you guys coming in to our EPI headquarters here for our Exit Is Now podcast. And you guys have a safe trip home, and we'll see you guys all next time. Thanks.